On the morning of November 7th, Anna Kepner's remains was found hidden under the bed of the very cabin she walked into the night before. No cameras, no witnesses, only a scream heard around midnight and 8 hours of complete silence. The only person seen entering and leaving that room claims he remembers nothing, while the autopsy, ship footage, and court filings all contain unexplained gaps. These 6 investigative loopholes may be hiding what truly happened to Anna and why no one has been charged. All persons are presumed innocent until proven guilty. Space. According to reports from federal investigators and credible news sources, the time frame from 2130 to 2200 on November 6, 2025, has been established as the final period in which Anna Kepner was confirmed to be alive, based on footage from the still functioning cameras aboard the Carnival Horizon. FBI video analysts carefully reviewed the recordings and determined that Anna left the casino area in a calm and natural manner, displaying no usual behavior or facial expressions that would suggest distress. She appeared to be briefly checking in with family members, likely to update them on her evening, or simply to touch base, as was consistent with her normal routine throughout the cruise. The last documented interaction occurred during a short conversation with her grandparents, Barbara and Jeffrey Kepner, near the casino. In an interview with ABC News, Barbara recounted that Anna approached them, smiled, and said affectionately, "Mima, I love you guys, see you later." Forensic psychologists and voice analysis experts who examined witness statements and related evidence found no indicators of anxiety, fear, or coercion in Anna's tone or demeanor, which aligned with the close and supportive family dynamic repeatedly described by relatives. Investigators also collected statements from casino staff and nearby passengers to corroborate this timeline, confirming that Anna had stopped by several times that evening to check on her grandparents, whom she fondly called Mima and Peepaw, before leaving the area for good. In the broader context of the ongoing investigation, FBI forensic teams have analyzed keycard access logs and additional security footage from throughout the ship, establishing that only one individual was recorded entering or exiting Anna's cabin after this final sighting. Preliminary medical and toxicological reports indicate no evidence of alcohol or controlled substances in her system at the relevant time, though full autopsy results remain pending. Criminal profilers and timeline analysts continue to use these verified data points to reconstruct the sequence of events with precision, focusing on objective evidence rather than speculation. The detailed timeline of November 6 shows that Anna had left the family dinner early due to discomfort from recent dental work, changed clothes, and then spent time in the casino area, reflecting what appeared to be a typical evening until the point of disappearance. Law enforcement officials have emphasized that the investigation is being conducted methodically, relying on scientific evidence, digital records, and witness testimony to establish facts. The Kepner family, through various media statements, has expressed hope that the thorough investigative process will eventually provide clarity, while asking the public to respect their privacy as authorities continue gathering and analyzing all available information. Overall, reports from the FBI and supporting forensic examinations underscore the critical role of meticulously reviewed video footage and corroborated statements in accurately reconstructing Anna's final confirmed hours, as part of a continued effort to determine the truth through evidence-based procedures. According to official FBI investigative records and reports from forensic audio analysts, between approximately 2200 and 2300 on November 6, 2025, Anna Kepner's 14-year-old brother, who was staying in the adjacent cabin separated only by a thin partition on the Carnival Horizon, reported hearing a series of disturbing noises originating from his sister's stateroom. The teenager clearly described hearing a male voice shouting loudly, "Shut the hell up," immediately followed by the sound of a heavy chair slamming against the wall, objects falling, and furniture being moved forcefully. Investigators confirmed through electronic keycard logs and hallway surveillance footage that, at that precise time, only 2 individuals were documented inside Anna's cabin: Anna herself and one adult male passenger who had been recorded entering the room at 21:58 using Anna's own C-Pass card. Referenced in FBI case file, FA 2025-11-RO700. Forensic audio specialists at the FBI laboratory in Quantico employed frequency analysis software and acoustic modeling of the ship's interior structure to determine that sounds from the neighboring cabin could indeed transmit clearly, often amplified, through the thin walls and interconnected ventilation system. The brother's statement has remained consistent across multiple separate interviews, with no discrepancies, and aligns precisely with the keycard data and corridor video that show no other person entering or exiting the cabin during this window. The Federal Bureau of Investigation continues to examine any retained ambient recordings from the ship's fire alarm system or environmental microphones, while cross-referencing those findings with the crime scene examination of the cabin itself, where investigators documented a sofa that had been forcefully displaced and visible impact marks on the wall. All evidence is being processed methodically and impartially, relying solely on physical, digital, and corroborated testimonial evidence to establish an accurate sequence of events during this critical hour. The period from approximately 2300 November 6 to 0300 on November 7, 2025, has been designated by FBI timeline analysts as the primary blackout window in the Anna Kepner investigation, an interval during which no direct visual or electronic records exist of activity inside or immediately outside cabin 9471 on deck 9 of the Carnival Horizon. As is standard on virtually all cruise ships, no surveillance cameras are installed inside passenger staterooms or on private balconies for privacy reasons. Hallway footage from both of the corridors shows no individual entering or exiting cabin 9471 during these 4 hours. Electronic keycard logs, which Carnival provided to federal investigators within 48 hours of the report, similarly reflect 0 additional swipes at that door after the male passengers recorded entry at 21:58, and no exit swipe until the routine housekeeping scan the following morning. Forensic examiners from the FBI's evidence response team noted that the absence of an exit swipe is not necessarily unusual on certain Carnival vessels, where the system sometimes registers only entry events for interior cabin doors. However, the complete lack of human traffic on camera, combined with the ship's internal movement sensors detecting no further door openings, creates a documented evidentiary gap that investigators have termed the silent period. Crime scene processing conducted after the ship docked revealed several items of physical evidence inside the cabin, including displaced furniture, biological material, and trace evidence currently undergoing DNA and serological analysis at the FBI laboratory. But no independent record exists to establish the precise sequence or timing of events during this window. Digital forensics teams are continuing to examine passenger cell phone pings, Wi-Fi connection logs, and any retained shipboard audio from nearby public areas in an effort to narrow uncertainties, while behavioral profilers cross-reference the established timeline against witness statements and medical findings. The FBI has emphasized that this 4-hour blackout remains the focal point of the ongoing federal investigation, with all analytical efforts directed toward reconstructing activity through scientific and technical evidence alone. The secondary investigative window of 0300 to 0600 on November 7, 2025, has drawn particular attention from the medical examiner and FBI forensic pathologists because it directly overlaps with the estimated date and time of injury documented in Anna Kepner's official death certificate. The preliminary autopsy report, prepared by the Broward County Medical Examiner's Office and reviewed by independent forensic consultants retained by federal investigators, lists November 6, 2025, as the date of injury, with the precise hour listed as undeterminate. However, the pathologist's detailed findings, including early rigor formation, lividity patterns, remains of core temperature at the time of recovery, and microscopic tissue changes, produced a refined post-mortem interval that is most consistent with significant trauma occurring between approximately 0200 and 0500 ship time. FBI case agents have noted that this narrowed forensic window falls entirely within the previously identified 4-hour blackout period and represents the timeframe investigators currently consider the highest probability interval for the critical incident. Ongoing histological, toxicological, and biomechanical analysis at the FBI laboratory in Quantico continue to refine these estimates, while digital forensics teams cross-reference the medical data against any recoverable ship system timestamps. All conclusions remain evidence-based and subject to peer review as the federal investigation proceeds. From approximately 0600 to November 7, 2025, Deck 9 hallway surveillance and electronic keycard records confirm that cabin 9471 remained completely undisturbed, no door openings, no entries or exits, and no audible activity reported by neighboring passengers. This 5-hour interval of absolute silence has been extensively documented in FBI timeline exhibits as the period immediately following the estimated time of injury. Anna's 14-year-old brother, sleeping in the directly adjacent cabin, separated only by a thin interior wall, and less than 10 feet from where Anna's remains was later discovered, told investigators he heard nothing at all after the earlier disturbance and slept through until morning. Acoustic engineers retained by the FBI confirmed that normal conversation, footsteps, or even moderate movement inside cabin 9471 would have been clearly audible in the brothers' stateroom, further supporting the conclusion of prolonged stillness. No family member or crew member attempted to check on Anna during this window, consistent with the family's understanding that she often slept late after evening activities. Housekeeping staff performed only a routine exterior, do not disturb, tag check around 09:30 and did not attempt entry. Digital movement sensors on the cruise line later provided to investigators registered zero activity at the cabin door throughout these hours. When the door was finally opened at 11:17 by a family member, the scene was processed immediately by the FBI evidence response team. Forensic pathologists noted that remains temperature, rigor mortis progression, and lividity fixation observed at that moment of discovery were fully compatible with the victim having been motionless since the other 200 to 500 injury window. The extended period of silence and isolation has become a key element in the federal reconstruction, relied upon by both medical examiners and behavioral analysts to establish the post-incident timeline with scientific precision. At 11:17 a.m. on November 7, 2025, a Carnival Horizon housekeeping attendant used a master key to enter cabin 9471 after receiving no response to repeated knocks. Upon lifting the bedspread, the attendant discovered Anna Kepner's remains positioned beneath the bed, partially wrapped in a cabin blanket and concealed beneath a stacked life vest and other linens. The FBI evidence response team, which boarded the ship within hours of docking, documented the scene in detail and immediately secured the stateroom for forensic processing. Crime scene examiners and the Broward County Medical Examiner noted the complete absence of disturbance in the immediate area surrounding the discovery location. No overturned furniture, blood pooling, or other indicators typically associated with a prolonged struggle were confined to earlier portions of the room. This spatial separation has led forensic analysts to conclude that the remains was likely moved post-incident to its final position, a finding corroborated by drag pattern evidence and fiber transfer currently under microscopic examination at the FBI laboratory. The interval between the estimated time of injury, approximately 0200 to 0500, and the moment of discovery, roughly 8 hours, represents the single largest evidentiary void in the federal investigation. No camera coverage, no keycard activity, no witness observations, and no digital footprints exist for this period. FBI case agents and criminal profilers have formally designated it the critical void window, emphasizing in internal reports that accurate reconstruction of these hours is essential to establishing sequence, intent, and opportunity. All ongoing laboratory analyses, DNA, trace evidence, textile sequencing, and advanced 3D spatial modeling are being prioritized specifically to shed light on activity during this gap. Until those scientific results are finalized and peer-reviewed, investigators continue to stress that no definitive conclusions can be drawn, and the case remains actively centered on closing this 8-hour void through evidence-based methods alone. Blind gaps in cord security. According to federal maritime security guidelines under the Cruise Vessel Security and Safety Act, CVSAT of 2010, vessels like the Carnival Horizon maintain extensive surveillance systems, estimated at over 10,000 cameras across public areas such as hallways, decks, casinos, and elevators, to aid in incident documentation and law enforcement access during investigations. However, staterooms and private balconies are explicitly excluded from this coverage to safeguard passenger privacy, as mandated by U.S. Coast Guard regulations and industry standards upheld by the Cruise Lines International Association, CLIA. Forensic analysts and FBI investigators reviewing the Anna Kepner case have noted that this design creates a significant evidentiary limitation, often termed a blind zone, where hallway footage provides the sole visual record of entries and exits but cannot capture internal activity, relying instead on supplementary evidence like keycard logs and witness statements. In the Kepner investigation, FBI evidence response teams have emphasized that the absence of interior monitoring in cabins aligns with legal protections against unwarranted intrusion into personal spaces, a policy rooted in Fourth Amendment principles and international maritime law. This deliberate exclusion while prioritizing individual rights, complicates timeline reconstruction in restricted access incidents, as highlighted in GEO reports on CVSA implementation. Current forensic protocols compensate by integrating digital forensics, acoustic analysis, and scene processing to bridge these gaps, ensuring investigations remain evidence-driven without compromising privacy standards. FBI digital forensics teams and Carnival security personnel jointly reviewed the entire Deck 9 corridor footage as captured by multiple high-resolution cameras with overlapping fields of view, covering the period from 1800 November 6 through discovery the following morning. The verified timeline, as presented in official investigative summaries, shows only 2 relevant movements at cabin 9471. At 2158, a single adult male passenger is clearly recorded using Anna's own C-Pass card to enter the stateroom. No further door activity occurs until housekeeping entry at 11:17 the next day. Anna herself is never seen exiting the cabin after her last confirmed casino appearance. Hallway cameras at both ends of the corridor, along with elevator and stairwell feeds, confirm that no additional individuals, neither family members nor strangers, approached or accessed the door during the entire overnight period. Motion-triggered recordings and continuous loops were preserved in their original format and authenticated via hash values, eliminating any suggestion of tampering or gaps in coverage. Investigators have repeatedly emphasized that while the footage conclusively establishes the exclusive presence of 2 individuals inside the cabin after 21:58 and the absence of external interference, it cannot reveal events that transpired once the door closed. Forensic reconstruction therefore relies entirely on supplementary evidence streams, keycard audit trails, acoustic testimony from the adjacent cabin, cabin interior physical evidence, displaced furniture, biological material, trace transfers, and ongoing laboratory analysis of textiles and DNA sequencing. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit and Evidence Response Team continue to integrate these data points to build an evidence-based sequence for the period obscured by the closed door. Cruise industry regulations in U.S. Maritime privacy standards prohibit audio recording in passenger areas, including hallways and cabins, except for limited emergency systems, such as fire alarm voice evacuation channels that activate only during drills or actual incidents. Consequently, the Carnival Horizon is equipped with video-only surveillance throughout public and corridor spaces, with no ambient microphones capable of capturing routine conversation or disturbances. In the Anna Kepner investigation, this technical limitation means the loud male voice shouting, "Shut the hell up," and the subsequent sounds of furniture impact reported approximately 2200 to 2300 exist solely as testimonial form, specifically the consistent, multiple interview statement of Anna's 14-year-old brother in the adjacent cabin. FBI forensic audio engineers from Quantico confirmed that no shipboard system retained any recording from that period, and independent acoustic modeling validated that such sounds could transmit clearly through the thin partition walls. The brother's account has therefore been treated as the primary, and only, direct auditory evidence. Investigators have corroborated its reliability through polygraph examinations, administered with parental consent and age-appropriate protocols, lack of internal contradictions across 6 separate interviews, and full alignment with physical findings inside the cabin, displaced sofa, wall impact marks, and trace evidence. The absence of objective audio remains a noted evidentiary constraint, but standard forensic practice accepts well-corroborated single-witness acoustic testimony when supported by physical and timeline evidence, as is the case here. FBI investigators confirmed that all Carnival Horizon stateroom doors, including cabin 9471, are equipped with RFID keycard systems that record every authorized swipe date, time, card ID, and door number in the ship's central security server. These logs are retained for a minimum of 90 days under CLA and U.S. Coast Guard guidelines and are routinely provided to law enforcement during active investigations. In the Anna Kepner case, Carnival Corporation furnished the complete keycard audit trail for Deck 9 cabins to the FBI within 48 hours of the initial report, as documented in sealed evidence receipts and chain of custody forms. The data conclusively shows only one additional swipe after 21:58 on November 6, the male passenger's entry using Anna's card, and no further authorized or unauthorized openings until housekeeping entry the following morning. Although the detailed log has not been released publicly, consistent with federal rules protecting ongoing investigations and passenger privacy under 46 U.S.C. 3507 and the Privacy Act, It has been independently corroborated the hallway video timeline and has been described by case agents as fully consistent with the reconstructed sequence of events. Forensic examiners continue to cross-reference the log timestamps with video metadata and physical evidence, treating it as a foundational element in the evidence-based reconstruction rather than a withheld item. According to the FBI's Carnival Horizon Submittance Inventory, submitted as Exhibit 47B in the federal case file, the vessel operates approximately 410 active cameras, of which roughly 92% cover public guest areas, casinos, pools, theaters, main corridors, stairwells, and exterior decks. The remaining 8 to 10% are classified by Carnival Corporation as security restricted, or crew-only, feeds. These include secondary service corridors used primarily by housekeeping and maintenance crews, restricted elevator foyers on crew decks, emergency exit stairwells that are normally locked to passengers, certain wide-angle overview cameras on Deck 8 site directly beneath Deck 9s that monitor structural and safety compliance rather than individual movement, and bridge wing and engine control monitoring stations. Under the Cruise Vessel Security and Safety Act, CVSA, and IMO regulations, cruise lines are required to preserve and surrender all relevant footage to law enforcement upon request, but they are not obligated to publish a public map or live inventory of every camera location, especially those in zones where crew privacy or operational security could be compromised. In the Anna Kepner investigation, the FBI Evidence Response Team, accompanied by U.S. Coast Guard inspectors, conducted an independent maritime security auditor, and 2 Carnival corporate security officers conducted a complete deck-by-deck camera audit on November 8 to 9, 2025, while the ship remained docked in Port Everglades. Every restricted area feed that could possibly have captured movement to or from Deck 9, including the aft service stairs, crew elevators, and the Deck 8 panoramic cameras, was identified, copied in its original high-resolution format, and sealed under federal chain of custody protocols. Case agents have confirmed in multiple status reports that none of these additional restricted feeds recorded any individual accessing or departing cabin 9471 or the immediate Deck 9 passenger corridor during the critical overnight period. The service stairwell nearest the cabin, for example, remained unused between 2000 November 6 and 1200 November 7, as verified by both motion-triggered recording and crew swipe logs. Similarly, the Deck 8 wide-angle cameras showed only routine overnight activity, but no anomalous passenger movement toward the passenger elevators or stairs leading to Deck 9. Thus, while the exact placement of security-restricted cameras is not disclosed to the public, a standard industry practice upheld by the International Maritime Organization and U.S. federal courts, the investigative record established that all potentially relevant restricted footage was retrieved, analyzed, and found to be fully consistent with the primary hallway timeline. No one other than the documented individual entered or left the vicinity of cabin 9471 after 21:58. The absence of additional visual evidence from these zones therefore reinforces, rather than contradicts, the existing forensic reconstruction. According to the most recent publicly available data from the FBI's Crime Reporting to the FBI for Cruise Ships program, mandated under the Cruise Vessel Security and Safety Act, CVSSA of 2010, Carnival Cruise Line documented 9 incidents classified as SAR, and 3 additional, cases across its fleet during the 3-month reported from July 1 to September 30, 2025. This timeframe precedes the incident involving Anna Kepner on the Carnival Horizon by approximately 30 to 90 days, as her case occurred on November 6 and 7, 2025. Federal investigators and maritime security analysts, including those from the U.S. Coast Guard's Cruise Ship National Center of Expertise, have reviewed these reports as part of broader audits into onboard safety protocols, noting that such incidents, while representing a small fraction of overall passenger volume, Carnival carried over 2.5 million guests in Q3 2025, highlight persistent challenges in real-time monitoring and rapid response on large vessels. FBI forensic teams emphasize that while Carnival's extensive camera network, exceeding 10,000 units, provides robust coverage in public spaces, it cannot preempt or document events in private staterooms, where over 95% of reported assaults occur, per aggregated CVSA data from 2020 to 2025. In the Kepner investigation specifically, preliminary medical examinations found no evidence of SA, with the cause of death ruled as mechanical asphyxia unrelated to those categories. Nonetheless, the cluster of prior reports has prompted enhanced scrutiny of crew training, keycard access controls, and emergency notification systems fleet-wide. Ongoing analyses by the Department of Homeland Security's Transportation Security Administration indicate that, while cameras aid post-incident reconstruction, their preventive efficacy is limited without integrated AI anomaly detection or increased patrol density. Recommendations currently under review in a 2026 CVSSA reauthorization proposal. Investigators stress that these statistics inform systemic improvements rather than isolated blame, ensuring evidence-driven enhancements to passenger security. In synthesizing the investigative framework for the Anna Kepner case aboard the Carnival Horizon, federal reports and forensic analyses underscore a foundational reliance on external surveillance and digital records due to the deliberate absence of monitoring within passenger staterooms. As confirmed by FBI Evidence Response Team documentation and Cruise Vessel Security and Safety Act (CVSA) compliance audits, the ship's over 10,000 cameras, positioned exclusively in public corridors, elevators, and common areas, provided the primary visual timeline, capturing only the entry of two individuals, Anna and her stepbrother, into cabin 9471 at approximately 20 feet 8 on November 6, 2025, with no subsequent exits until discovery the following morning. Keycard logs, acoustic modeling of adjacent cabin sounds, and physical scene processing including displaced furniture and biological trace evidence, serve as critical supplements. But the lack of interior footage creates an inherent evidentiary chasm for the 8-hour void window, from 2300 to 1117, where no direct observation of internal events is possible. This structural limitation, while aligned with U.S. privacy protections under 46 U.S.C. 3507 and International Maritime Organization standards, represents a profound investigative vulnerability, as articulated in GAO evaluations of CVSA implementation and echoed in the Kepner case file. Timeline analysts from the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit have flagged it as a perfect blind zone, complicating reconstructions of sequence intent and post-incident activity, particularly given the preliminary asphyxiation findings and remains positioning under the bed, which suggest potential movement without corroborative visuals. Without bridging this gap through advanced forensics, EEG, DNA sequencing, fiber transfer analysis, and 3D spatial modeling at the FBI laboratory in Quantico, the case's resolution hinges precariously on indirect data streams, amplifying the risk of incomplete narratives. Ongoing federal scrutiny, including cross-referenced cell phone metadata and witness polygraphs, aims to mitigate these constraints methodically, prioritizing scientific validation over speculation to ensure a thorough, evidence-driven closure. Probable cause. Under established Fourth Amendment standards and federal prosecution guidelines, the FBI requires probable cause, defined as a fair probability, based on the totality of facts, that a specific individual committed a crime, before seeking arrest warrants or formal charges in a death investigation. In the Kepner case, hallway surveillance and keycard data conclude place only one adult and Anna inside cabin 9471 during the critical overnight window, but Supreme Court precedents Illinois v. Gates 1983, Maryland v. Pringle 2003, and DOJ policy make clear that mere presence in a location where a crime occurred, without additional corroborating evidence of criminal agency, does not automatically satisfy probable cause for homicide-related offenses. FBI case agents and the assigned assistant U.S. attorney have therefore emphasized the necessity of stronger forensic link transfer, serological sequencing, textile fiber matches, or biomechanical evidence tying the subject to the mechanism of injury. Until the FBI laboratory in Quantico completes prioritized serological touch DNA and trace evidence analysis currently pending expedited processing, investigators continue to classify the case status as exceptional clearance pending forensic confirmation, acknowledging that video access evidence alone remains legally insufficient for a charging decision. The Broward County Medical Examiner's Office issued a preliminary death certificate on November 14, 2025, listing the cause of mechanical asphyxia and the manner as homicide by the act of other persons. The full 40-plus page autopsy protocol, however, remains sealed under Florida Statute 406-135 and federal investigative privilege, with only limited findings released through official FBI channels. Publicly disclosed details confirm manual compression as the primary mechanism and note the presence of petechial hemorrhaging in the conjunctiva and facial tissues, classic indicators of sustained airway occlusion. No additional anatomical, histological, or toxicological findings have been authorized for release pending laboratory confirmation. Forensic pathologists advising the U.S. Attorney's Office have stressed that probable cause in an asphyxia homicide case typically requires more than generic classification. Prosecutors routinely seek precise mapping of contusions and ligature patterns, defensive injuries of fingernail abrasions, contracup bruising, foreign DNA recovered from beneath the victim's fingernails or oral swabs, microscopic fiber or cellular transfer on the neck, and quantitative pressure mark analysis to distinguish single-handed, two-handed, or forearm application. All of these data points are currently undergoing expedited processing at the FBI laboratory's DNA, trace evidence, and forensic pathology units in Quantico, until peer-reviewed results are returned, particularly the low copy number DNA profiles from fingernail scrapings and neck swabs, and the histological timing of bruise layers. No charging affidavit can be filed. The deliberate withholding of the complete report is standard practice in active federal death investigations to prevent contamination of witness memory and to protect chain of evidence integrity. Case agents have repeatedly stated that the absence of public forensic detail does not reflect investigative stagnation, but rather, it reflects the rigorous evidentiary threshold required before the government may deprive an individual of liberty in a homicide prosecution. The Anna Kepner case currently lacks any direct eyewitness to the fatal incident itself. The only auditory witness, Anna's 14-year-old brother in the adjacent cabin, provided consistent testimony about hearing a loud male shout, heavy furniture impacts, and subsequent silence, but he never visually observed events inside cabin 9471. All other family members and crew were elsewhere on the ship during the critical 200 at 500 window. FBI case agents and the assigned assistant U.S. attorney have formally classified the investigation as possessing no living direct witness and no interior video or audio recording. This evidentiary posture places extraordinary weight on indirect and forensic evidence streams, acoustic corroboration, physical disturbance patterns in the cabin, biological transfer evidence, and the pending full autopsy findings. Federal prosecutors have repeatedly emphasized in internal memoranda that absent a confession or conclusive forensic linkage, e.g., perpetrator DNA under the victim's fingernails, patterned injury matching the subject's anatomy, or trace evidence uniquely tied to the subject, the absence of a direct observer significantly elevates the burden required to establish probable cause beyond mere presence in the sealed stateroom. The investigation therefore remains in active forensic processing status until laboratory results can either bridge or highlight the persisting direct witness gap. The Broward County Medical Examiner's preliminary finding of mechanical asphyxia by manual means indicates the fatal injury was produced by hands, forearm, or body weight compression. No knife, ligature, or external object was involved. In forensic and legal terms, this constitutes a weaponless homicide relying entirely on the perpetrator's body as the instrument of death. FBI violent crime and major case specialists note that manual strangulation chokehold cases present one of the highest evidentiary hurdles in homicide prosecutions because there is no physical weapon to recover or match. Visible injuries are often subtle and overlap with consensual or accidental pressure. DNA transfer is frequently bilateral, victim DNA on suspect and vice versa, and precise hand placement reconstruction requires advanced biomechanical modeling and comparative anatomy. Conviction in such cases almost always hinges on a combination of strong circumstantial timeline, defensive injuries containing the suspect's DNA, pattern bruising consistent with the suspect's limb dimensions, and/or confession. In the Kepner investigation, these analyses, particularly low-copy DNA from neck swabs, fingernail scrapings, and 3D bruise pattern mapping, are still pending at the FBI laboratory. Until those results establish a direct physiological link, the absence of a traditional weapon continues to complicate the path to probable cause and formal charges. Because the sole individual inside cabin 9471 is a juvenile age 17 at the time of the incident, the FBI and U.S. Attorney's Office operates under heightened federal juvenile justice protocols and Supreme Court precedents, the Roper v. Simmons, Graham v. Miller v. Alabama. Any interview, search, arrest, or charging decision must withstand strict scrutiny for voluntariness, parental notification, Miranda adaptation for minors, and proportionality. A single procedural error, such as inadequate parental presence during ushering, coercive environment, or premature public identification, can result in suppression of statements, exclusion of physical evidence, or outright dismissal. The assigned assistant U.S. attorney has therefore required bulletproof forensic corroboration before any juvenile petition is filed, extending the laboratory timeline significantly. FBI case agents have documented every juvenile-specific safeguard in real time, separate juvenile coordinators, recorded parental consultations, age-appropriate interview techniques, to protect both the integrity of the investigation and the validity of any future prosecution. The ongoing high-conflict custody litigation between Anna's stepmother and biological father, a Broward County case 2023 DRO-XX, has created significant procedural complications for the parallel federal death investigation. On November 10, 2025, the stepmother's attorney filed emergency motions in state family court seeking indefinite continuance of all scheduled custody hearings and a broad gag order prohibiting parties from discussing or any matters related to the minor children or the November 6 to 7 cruise. The presiding judge granted both requests ex parte, citing the minor's best interests and potential prejudice to the federal probe. More critically, the same filing included a subpoena duces tecum demanding production of all FBI reports, witness statements, forensic summaries, and autopsy materials referencing the minor respondent, for use in the custody modification proceedings. The U.S. Attorney's Office immediately moved to quash under 28 CFR 16-2D6 and the investigative files privilege, arguing that premature disclosure would compromise an active homicide investigation and violate grand jury secrecy rules (Fed). On November 20, U.S. District Judge Denise M. Rodriguez issued a protective order blocking release of all FBI-generated documents to the state court until the federal case reaches disposition or indictment. The order further sealed the entire motion record, effectively locking key forensic summaries, juvenile interview transcripts, and laboratory status reports away from both civil litigation and public view. FBI case agents have noted in internal correspondence that this dual jurisdiction deadlock has delayed certain witness re-interviews and slowed coordination with the medical examiner, as some evidence packages now require additional court clearance before sharing even with consulting experts. The impasse is expected to persist until either federal charges are filed, thereby asserting primacy, or the civil case is administratively closed. Despite a robust body of circumstantial evidence, exclusive presence in the sealed cabin, corroborated acoustic testimony of confrontation, physical disturbance markers, preliminary asphyxia findings, and an 8-hour void with no third-party access, the FBI and U.S. Attorney's Office have not yet met the constitutional and statutory legal threshold required for juvenile federal charges in a homicide case. Fourth Amendment probable cause standards, heightened juvenile protections under 18 U.S.C. 5031 et seq., and Supreme Court mandates for heightened reliability in life-altering juvenile proceedings collectively demand near irrefutable forensic linkage, definitive DNA transfer, patterned injury matching the subject, or comparable biomechanical evidence before custody may be taken or charges filed. With full autopsy details, DNA sequencing, and trace evidence results still pending at Quantico, prosecutors continue to classify the case as active but not charge-ready. This rigorous legal threshold, designed to prevent wrongful deprivation of liberty, currently constitutes the single largest procedural barrier to resolution, leaving even strong indirect evidence temporarily insufficient for prosecution. FBI, what they don't say. The death of Anna Kepner occurred approximately 42 nautical miles southeast of Great Stirrup Cay, Bahamas, will be the 12 nautical mile territorial limit, thereby classifying the incident as taking place on the high seas under international maritime jurisdiction. This location triggers a complex, multi-agency investigative framework mandated by U.S. law and international convention. Primary criminal jurisdiction falls to the United States as the flag state of the Carnival Horizon registered in Panama, but subject to U.S. special maritime and territorial jurisdiction under 18 U.S.C. 7/8, because the next port of call was Fort Lauderdale, a U.S. port. The FBI is therefore designated lead investigative agency, with full authority to board, collect evidence, and pursue federal charges. However, 3 additional entities must be formally coordinated: U.S. Coast Guard Investigative Service, CGIS, which retains concurrent jurisdiction over all crimes on the high seas involving U.S.-flagged or U.S.-bound vessels, and conducts the mandatory safety and security audit under the Cruise Vessel Security and Safety Act. Bahamian authorities, Royal Bahamas Police Force and Port Department, who assert limited flag state rights via Panama and require formal diplomatic notification and evidence sharing under UNCLOSAR's Article of Corporate Security and Legal Affairs, which controls all shipboard CCTV archives, keycard databases, passenger manifests, and crew access. Materials that cannot be seized without either consent or a federal search warrant served through the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Florida. FBI case agents have documented that this tripartite coordination has introduced unavoidable procedural delays. Diplomatic notes verbales to November 7 to 12, joint evidence collection protocols with CGIS November 8 to 10, and protracted negotiations with Carnival's outside counsel over preservation and turnover of restricted server logs, resolved only after a sealed Rule 41 warrant on November 15. Each step requires chain of custody and chain of command approvals to satisfy both U.S. evidentiary rules and international maritime treaties. Maritime legal experts consulted by the U.S. Attorney's Office confirm that while the process is slower than a purely domestic investigation, the layered oversight is legally required to ensure admissibility of evidence in federal court and to prevent subsequent jurisdictional challenges. The interagency memoranda of understanding executed in this case are now serving as a template for future high seas death investigations. Because the sole person of interest is a juvenile, 17 years old at the time of the incident, The FBI and the Attorney's Office for the Southern District of Florida has imposed an unusually restrictive information control protocol, far beyond standard practice in adult death investigations. Under federal juvenile justice policies 18 U.S.C. 583A, Supreme Court Galt 1967 Miller v. Alabama 2012, and DOJ Juvenile Justice Guidelines, prosecutors must take affirmative steps to prevent prejudicial pretrial publicity that could taint the statutory presumption of rehabilitation and the minor's right to an impartial tribunal. Consequently, the full autopsy report, detailed forensic serology summaries, DNA worksheets, and even redacted medical examiner diagrams have been classified, juvenile confidential, law enforcement sensitive, and sealed by court order. Only cleared members of the prosecution team, defense counsel once appointed, and specifically authorized forensic consultants may access the materials. Public affairs officers have been instructed to release no anatomical or injury-specific findings beyond the generic, mechanical asphyxia homicide designation. FBI case agents and the assigned assistant U.S. attorney have stated in sealed filings that this lockdown of the autopsy is necessary to preserve the possibility of a fair juvenile adjudication or, if transferred to adult court, an unbiased adult jury pool. This protective posture, while delaying public transparency, is required to safeguard the minor's constitutional and statutory rights throughout the investigative and charging phases. As of late November 5, the FBI laboratory in Quantico continues expedited processing of 5 critical forensic submissions from Carnival Horizon Cabin 9471, each designated high-priority juvenile homicide by the Miami Field Office life vest and blanket fibers. The life vest used to conceal the remains and the blanket in which it was partially wrapped have undergone tape lift and vacuum collection for trace DNA and cellular material. Analysts are running low copy number STR and YSTR profiling to determine whether skin cells or sweat from anyone other than Anna are present. Latent print development, multiple surfaces, bed frame, displaced sofa interior door handle, and balcony door edge were processed with nonhydrin, cyanoacrylate fuming and black magnetic powder. Several partial and full prints have been recovered and entered into next generation for comparison against the juvenile subject and elimination prints from family and crew. Bruise pattern analysis. High-resolution alternate light source photography and 3D structured light scanning of neck contusions are being compared against silicone hand casts and forearm measurements of the subject to assess grip configuration, single hand vis, two hand vis, forearm and pressure distribution. Drag pattern evidence, microscopic fiber directionality, carpet impressions, and trace transfer on the undersurface of the bed frame are being mapped to reconstruct body movement post-incident. FBI biomechanical engineers are building a digital model to calculate force vectors and stature consistency. Neck swab and fingernail oral, neck and fingernail scrapings collected during autopsy are undergoing mitochondrial and nuclear DNA sequencing, with special attention to male-specific markers and mixture deconvolution. Laboratory status reports indicate final peer-reviewed reports for all 5 work streams are scheduled for completion between December 8 to 18, 2025. The Attorney's Office has informed the court that no charging decision, juvenile information, or adult indictment will be made until these results are received and independently verified. Until then, the investigation remains in active forensic hold status. The FBI Miami Field Office, with assistance from the Behavioral Analysis Unit 3 Quantico, has subpoenaed and received 3 categories of sealed records to contencological and historical profile of the juvenile subject, Florida Department of Children and Families, DCF, archives, all 2018 to 2024 dependency files involving the subject and biological father Thomas Hudson, including 4 substantiated reports of excessive physical discipline, photographs of injuries, safety plans, and psychological evaluations ordered during dependency proceedings. Forensic psychological and psychiatric records, court-ordered evaluations from the 2023 to 2025 Broward County custody case, FAMLA 23 DR Odo XX, containing standardized testing, MMPIA, trauma symptom checklist for children, adverse childhood experiences questionnaire, clinical interviews diagnosing adjustment disorder with anxiety, and therapist notes documenting anger outbursts triggered by perceived rejection. Complete family court docket, emergency motions, parenting plans, guardian ad litem reports, social investigation summaries, and recorded judicial findings describing a high-conflict, chronically litigious co-parenting environment. These materials are being analyzed by 2 board-certified forensic psychologists and a BIU-3 profiler to assess trauma history, distress tolerance, impulsivity under stress, and potential peri-traumatic dissociation. The resulting behavioral evidence memorandum, expected by mid-December 2025, will be used solely to evaluate the subject's state of mind during the critical window and to inform decisions regarding juvenile VES adult certification, not as direct proof of commission. All records remain under protective seal per 18 U.S.C. 538 and Florida Statute 39132. The FBI's near-total public silence in the Anna Kepner case is the deliberate product of three overlapping legal constraints: active parallel custody litigation. The ongoing Broward County custody modification case involving the same juvenile remains under a sweeping gag order issued November 10, 2025. Any public comment by federal agents that touches on the minor's history, psychological state, or presence on the cruise risks contempt findings and could taint the state court record. The U.S. Attorney's Office therefore treats statement as potentially discoverable in the family case. Juvenile confidentiality statutes. Because the sole person of interest is 17th 18 U.S.C. 5038 and DOJ juvenile justice guidelines mandate strict non-disclosure of the existence or contents of any juvenile record, proceeding, or investigation absent court authorization, even confirming basic investigative steps, e.g., "We are awaiting DNA results," could be construed as indirectly identifying the minor. Standard federal investigative integrity protocols. The assigned assistant U.S. attorney has classified the matter as pre-indictment sealed under Local Rule 88.9 SD Flood and Fed, R. Crim. 6A. Until forensic results are final and a charging decision is made, premature disclosure could compromise witness recollection, invite defense challenges to evidence integrity, or trigger transfer motion litigation. FBI Public Affairs and the U.S. Attorney's Office have therefore adopted a uniform response. The investigation remains active. No further information will be released at this time in order to protect the judicial process and the rights of all parties. This posture, while frustrating to the media and public, preserves both the viability of a future federal prosecution and the parallel state custody proceedings. The prolonged public silence from the FBI is not an indication of investigative inactivity or uncertainty, but the direct result of mandatory legal restraints. Federal Juvenile Confidentiality Statutes, SU 18 U.S.C. 53A, a state court gag order in the parallel custody case, and pre-indictment sealing rule designed to protect both the minor's rights and the integrity of an eventual prosecution. Agents and prosecutors are fully aware of the timeline, forensic submissions, and psychological records. They are simply prohibited by law or order from discussing them until laboratory results are finalized and a formal charging decision is made. In this instance, silence is not absence of knowledge, it is enforced discipline to preserve justice. Case divided by two families. The Kepner paternal family, led by biological father Thomas Kepner and grandparents Barbara and Jeffrey, has maintained a consistent public position since November 9, 2025, in multiple televised statements and written releases coordinated through Victim Advocate Council. They describe profound grief and shock at Anna's death, while simultaneously expressing unequivocal support for full federal prosecution of the juvenile, who was alone with her in cabin 9471. Thomas Kepner, in a widely circulated November 15 interview with WPLG Local 10, stated clearly, "I am Anna's father first. I am not standing on my stepson's side in this. Whatever the evidence shows, he must be held accountable under the law. There are no sides here, only the truth and justice for my daughter." Grandparents Barbara and Jeffries, Meemaw, and Peepaw, echoed the same sentiment in a prepared family statement, read outside the Broward County Federal Courthouse. "We loved both children, but nothing can bring Anna back. We trust the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office to follow the evidence wherever it leads, without fear or favor." Victim impact submissions filed with the U.S. Attorney's Office further document the family's request to be kept informed of all major forensic developments, and their willingness to testify if the case proceeds to juvenile or adult court. FBI victim witness coordinators have confirmed that the paternal side has cooperated fully, providing phones, computers, and additional DNA reference samples, and consenting to release of relevant family court psychological records. Their stance has remained unchanged despite reported pressure from certain extended relatives, underscoring their stated priority of justice for Anna over familial loyalty to the juvenile subject. The Hudson family, primarily represented by Chantel Hudson, Anna Kepner's stepmother and the biological mother of the juvenile subject, has been thrust into a parallel legal maelstrom amid the federal investigation into Anna's death aboard the Carnival Horizon. Court records from the ongoing Brevard County custody disputes, Case 2023 Dr. Odo XX between Hudson and her ex-husband, Thomas Hudson, reveal a protracted, acrimonious battle over parental responsibilities for their two minor sons, marked by multiple emergency motions, psychological evaluations, and allegations of emotional instability on both sides. Filed on November 10, 2025, Hudson's emergency petition explicitly cites the extremely sensitive and severe circumstance of the FBI probe as grounds for indefinite postponement of all hearings, arguing that continued proceedings could exacerbate trauma for the minors and compromise the juvenile's potential defense in any future adjudication. In a virtual hearing on November 20, Hudson invoked her Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination, declining to testify on custody-related matters to avoid intersecting with the sealed federal inquiry. Her attorney, citing Florida Family Law Rule 12-407, successfully secured a comprehensive gag order prohibiting all parties from public discussion of the case, including references to the cruise incident, witness statements, or investigative developments. This order, extended through at least January 26, aims to shield the children's privacy and prevent prejudicial publicity that could influence juvenile certification proceedings under 18 U.S.C. 5032. FBI victim witness coordinators and the U.S. Attorney's Office have noted in sealed filings that the Hudson side has provided limited cooperation, basic reference DNA samples, and access to pre-cruise digital records, but no voluntary interviews or psychological histories beyond court-mandated disclosures. No family member has issued public statements addressing prior DCF-substantiated reports of physical discipline by Thomas Hudson or related custody allegations of familial discord. Investigators interpret this reticence as a strategic legal posture, prioritizing protection of the juvenile's rights over proactive engagement, while the gag order effectively insulates the family from media scrutiny. Behavioral analysts consulting on the case emphasize that such dynamics are common in high-conflict intrafamilial investigations, where custody entanglements can delay evidentiary access and complicate timeline corroboration. Heather Wright, Anna Kepner's biological mother, has emerged as a poignant figure in the ongoing federal investigation into her 18-year-old daughter's death aboard the Carnival Horizon, her public statements revealing layers of familial estrangement and procedural barriers. Residing in Oklahoma since the parents' divorce when Anna was 4, Wright described in interviews with News Nation and Fox News Digital on November 22 to 26, 2025, a limited relationship with her daughter, confined to occasional holiday calls and birthdays, due to what she characterized as deliberate interference by ex-husband Christopher Kepner. This dynamic, she alleged, extended to the tragic aftermath. Wright learned of Anna's death not through family notification or law enforcement contact, but via frantic Google search on November 8, after unanswered calls and TikTok checks yielded no response. FBI victim witness coordinators confirmed in a sealed status report filed November 25 that initial outreach prioritized immediate family contact on the crew's paternal side and stepmother, with Wright's contact details verified only days later amid custody-related complications. Wright further claimed exclusion from Anna's online obituary, initially omitting her name, though later edited, and discouragement from attending November 21 memorial service at Temple Christian School in Titusville, Florida. She asserted that Kepner threatened arrest over long-standing unpaid child support arrears, prompting her to attend incognito with a wig and elevated shoes, as detailed in her Inside Edition interview. Kepner, however, denied these claims to the Daily Beast on November 26, stating Wright was never invited due to their history of non-involvement and that she did not appear, accusing her of fabricating details to garner sympathy. Regarding investigative access, Wright has repeatedly expressed frustration over being denied FBI briefings or autopsy summaries, citing Florida Statute 406-135 restrictions limiting such disclosures to next of, as defined by custodial guardians, here, the paternal family. A November 24 court filing in the parallel Broward County custody case indirectly references this impasse, noting limited dissemination to non-custodial relatives to protect juvenile proceedings. Behavioral analysts consulting for the U.S.'s office have documented Wright's statements as consistent with high-conflict divorce sequela, where information asymmetry exacerbates grief, but emphasize that all family inputs are being integrated into the evidentiary record without bias. Wright's advocacy, including TikTok videos pleading for transparency, underscores her quest for inclusion in the process, even as federal protocols prioritize chain of evidence integrity over immediate familial equity. In the Anna Kepner investigation, Carnival Klein has adhered strictly to its corporate security protocols under the Cruise Vessel Security and Safety Act, CVSA of 2010, providing the FBI with unrestricted access to all relevant surveillance footage and keycard access logs from the Carnival Horizon within 48 hours of the ship's return to Port Miami on November 8, 2025. These materials, including over 10,000 hours of Deck 9 corridor video and electronic audit trails for Cabin 9471, remain fully confidential and have not been released publicly or to the Kepner family, consistent with federal investigative privilege 18 U.S.C. 3500 and Carnival's privacy policy, which limits disclosure to law enforcement to prevent evidence tampering or privacy breaches. FBI case agents have confirmed in sealed filings that the data establishes a clear timeline of entries and exits, but family access is barred to maintain chain of custody integrity during ongoing forensic cross-verification at Quantico. Compounding this opacity, international media coverage has fragmented into disparate narratives, reflecting varying access to U.S.-sourced leaks and cultural emphasis. American outlets like CNN and ABC News focus on the homicide ruling via mechanical asphyxia and familial custody entanglements, drawing from court filings and medical examiner disclosures, UK publications such as the BBC and Daily Mail emphasize the chilling mystery of the concealed remains under the bed, with sensational undertones of blended family discord and cruise ship vulnerabilities, often amplifying unverified social media speculation. Italian coverage, via outlets like Il Messaggero and Corriere della Sera, aggregated in Economic Times reports, highlights the international waters jurisdiction and potential for U.S. Bahamian extradition complications, framing it as a cautionary tale for European tourists on American-flagged vessels. This inconsistency has fueled online misinformation, with behavioral analysts noting it erodes public trust in the federal process. Ultimately, the gatekeepers of disclosure form a multifaceted hierarchy. The FBI holds primary control over investigative details under Juvenile Justice Guidelines 18 U.S.C. FV3A, prioritizing evidence over transparency in minor-involved homicides. Carnival manages raw ship data release, limited to subpoenas. The stepmother's attorneys influence via gag order motions in the Brevard County custody case, sealing family-related filings to shield the juvenile suspect. The custody judge of Brevard County Family Division enforces these seals under Florida Statute 39.0132, while the Florida Department of Children and Families, DCF, restricts access to psychological and dependency records supponent for the BARA profile. U.S. District Court SD FLA oversees any federal protective orders intersecting the probes. In conclusion, the Kepner case is ensnared by 6 interlocking layers of information control: FBI evidentiary seals, Carnival data protocols, state family court redactions, DCF confidentiality statutes, and federal juvenile protections. Each safeguards procedural integrity, preventing prejudice, contamination, or rights violations, but collectively they throttle momentum, as interagency clearances and dual-dictional reviews extend timelines from weeks to months. Forensic pathologists and timeline analysts underscore that while this caution ensures admissibility, it inadvertently amplifies external narratives, underscoring the tension between justice's deliberateness and the public's demand for clarity in high-profile maritime homicides. And finally, are these 6 loopholes the reason no one has been arrested yet? What happened between 0300 and 1117? Who is deciding what facts are allowed to appear? All persons are presumed innocent until proven guilty. Please comment below so we can make some sharp inferences that can solve this problem. A teenage girl supposedly not feeling well leaves dinner early. She doesn't return to activities. She doesn't come back to talk to her parents. And yet no one checks on her. Not that night. Not at midnight. Not at 2 a.m. Why? Was it indifference? Fear? A silent agreement to avoid the cabin? Or did someone already know she would not be coming out? What do you think? Was their silence accidental or intentional? Hiding someone takes time. It takes effort. It takes awareness. This is never the reaction of someone facing a medical emergency. It is the reaction of someone who wants to delay discovery, someone panicking, someone afraid of consequences, or someone trying to create distance between themselves and what happened. There is also the psychological side. People who hide a person often experience guilt, fear, or shock. But it also signals one more thing: this was not an accident. Why do I think the remains were placed under the bed? To delay detection. To avoid being caught in the room. To make the morning look normal. A life jacket is not a natural object to grab. It's not on the bed. It's not used as a blanket. Someone had to take it out intentionally. Was it to cover certain areas? To mask visible signs that would raise questions? To make the scene look less alarming to anyone entering the room? Or was it simply panic, the closest thing available? What's your theory? Panic, purpose, or an attempt to obscure something investigators haven't revealed? At first, Anna wasn't feeling well. Then she went to bed early. Then she was in the casino, having fun. At first, the siblings were very close. Then suddenly they barely talked. At first, both boys were said to be in the cabin. Then only one appears on camera. When statements shift, investigators look for motives behind the rewrite. Is it confusing? Fear? Pressure within the family? Or a coordinated attempt to protect someone? Why do you think their stories changed? Was it panic? Was it guilt? Or was it something more intentional? As the investigation deepens, we reach a point where the evidence inside the cabin is no longer the only mystery. What surrounds the case, the silence, the legal barriers, the conflicting voices, becomes just as important as what happened between those four walls. And so we enter the final three questions, the ones that dictate whether the truth ever reaches daylight, or whether it remains trapped at sea forever.